Is it me?
It's your turn.
It's me. Oh my goodness. So exciting. We're back. Okay. So in my research section, as I said, a lot was happening in this film. And I read a few articles. It showed it like really resonated with different people. And I read a lot of really impassioned like feelings about how different things that happen in the film could be interpreted to be a metaphor for this, for, as a representation of survival and trauma, witnessing like other women face violence or exploitation at the hands of men or at the hands of each other, because ultimately at the end of the day, everyone is a victim of the patriarchy. But in its doing a lot, I feel like there are, as Gabe said, there are ways that it falls short. There are ways that it's kind of like, is this doing more damage than messaging, I guess? And there's other ways that people, in that like the different bodies that she was in kind of represented the like survival of women who've faced intense trauma or violence, having to like live in a body where they don't recognize themselves anymore. Which I thought was like really like one heavy, but real. Like that's definitely like, if you've experienced something like that, it is hard to kind of like look at yourself and recognize exactly who you are after. Like trauma changes you. That's like a thing. You can't ever be who you were before. And there's a lot of elements of like queer women and like metaphors of like what it's like to conform in Japan, which I'll get into a little bit. But at the end of the day, I was really torn on this film because it was fun. It was wacky. There was a scene where for some reason an alligator ate a girl's crotch. Like it was
I forgot.
so much violence. And I don't know, for me, it felt gratuitous. And I don't know if that's just like, I've been through too much. Like I really like, I enjoyed it, but there was also many times where I had to like, be like, all right, this is, whew. And I honestly, the overt sexualization of girls, like children, was also pretty like, can we please not? I get it, but these better be adult like actresses that you are making do this. Because if you're just traumatizing more children to prove a point, that's like not what I want to be witnessing currently. But for me, I just had to figure out exactly what was happening. And that was sometimes hard with the gratuitous like violence and gore that was taking place. But I think after doing research, I kind of like see more of the elements that like a lot of people were arguing in favor of like what this was representing. And, you know, as voyeuristic and kind of gross as it kind of presented itself on screen, it did have like some, you know, good stuff. And I'll say like Gabe and I were definitely like throughout being like, ooh, Aki and Mitsuko, there definitely, something's happening. And then like, even like, kind of like, even just coming up on I remember like a lot of the scenes I was like texting, I was like, is this trying to say that like marriage is a way of selling women? Like, you know, like we were trying to like really pick up on anything that this film could be putting down, because like, as we do in this show, is everything has to have a reason to exist. Nothing is just like put in there for no reason. But I also recognize I watched this film with a very Western lens, in that like I'm not native to Japan. I have not lived a Japanese experience. I'm not an expert by any means on what like the LGBTQIA or women or femme presenting folk experience is in Japan. And I'd be remiss not to acknowledge like the negative ways Western society has influenced the world in pushing patriarchal Judeo-Christian ideals onto like other cultures. And that there's like historical evidence that Japan was not always like as conservative in reference to sex, women, and LGBTQIA plus people prior to Western colonialism. So I have done research though. And you know, the internet only provides so much perspective to complex issues such as this, but we're going to give it our best go. And honestly, if anyone has had any kind of different experience or they interpreted this film differently, we got like a really impassioned viewer who emailed us about our interpretation of Thelma. So like sometimes people think differently than us, and we love to hear about that because it like always lets us see things from a different perspective. So if you want to let us know, send us an email at theghouls.nextdoor@gmail.com. But yeah, some research happened. I read an article titled "The Nail That Sticks Out Gets Hammered Down: LGBT Bullying and Exclusion in Japanese Schools." And I will say, like, this article is like rough in terms of like if you have struggled with LGBT plus identity and you have like, I feel like this is something that is not exclusive to Japan. No one taught me about LGBTQ stuff when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, etc. Either. But there's a decent amount of like, basically just like ignorance that exists both in the education system, lots of places, but specifically in this article, it's focusing on Japan in regards to like LGBTQIA identity and like how people are seen in a kind of school system that is made in efforts to get students to conform to where, as you like, uniforms in a lot of ways do remove like stigma of class, but they also like make everyone look kind of the same. There's lots of like trying to make people fit into a box that takes place in lots of school systems. But specifically in the article, it kind of goes on to outline that Japanese LGBT children who attempt to report bullying as a result of this like pressure to conform, that face harassment and stuff in schools, the response from the authorities, like the teachers and administration at schools, totally is dependent upon like the school person's personal perspectives on sexual orientation, and that there isn't a lot of training or legislation even that like protects students who are either gender nonconforming, identify as LGBTQIA plus, or anything really. Like they kind of have to remain silent in order to avoid bad things happening to them, is what kind of like the article lines up. And it says that this is from interviews with 50 students, former students from the 14 prefectures throughout Japan. So it's like a wide variety of people from different places. And it's kind of cool in how it presents it. And there's lots of like comics that represent just like quotes from students who've experienced different things in terms of coming out or like trying to. So for example, there was one that they showed that was like a student wanted to wear a male uniform, but the administrator was like, that would go against basically our peace and harmony clause in our school rules, and you have to wear a female uniform. Like, you're not allowed to wear a boy's uniform. Just the fact that there's gendered clothing, rude.
Yeah.
But yeah, the article goes on to highlight a lot of personal stories, which I really thought like was effective in kind of giving some perspective to something I didn't know much about. And kind of like how we see in America as well, just like the lack of media representation that kind of forces individuals who might identify either as gender nonconforming or LGBTQIA as like othered. Like they don't have lives that are presented in media, so that it kind of seems like they don't get to find happiness, or like there's nothing to be like, I see someone who looks like me and now I feel seen enough to identify as that as well. And it also contributes to like the ignorance among peers or teachers or like people who have like grown up in the society already conforming to the system in play, that kind of really pushes heteronormative morals and stuff like that. That's just kind of like, it's not easy to be queer in Japan, as it is not easy to be queer a lot of places. But it really made me think of like, in terms of relating the information that I got back to the film and trying to like see it through a new lens, it makes a little more sense to me, as well as like the necessity to destroy that sense of normalcy with over the top violence. Like it definitely lit a fire in that regard. And it made me think of the one friend who, I don't remember her name, but you mentioned her, Gabe, the one that kept like insisting upon, not Aki, but the one who kept insisting, I think so, sir, insisting upon like doing something unexpected, doing something bold to free yourself from this like conformity and from this like repeating cycle of this like simulation type life that is just like drones or ants walking in a line, like not kind of having individuality or like expressing who they really are. One thing that like also kind of like made me really sad is there was an element to this that was like it seemed that the main focus was focusing on like harmony and peace, and that outweighed the needs of like underrepresented students exploring their identities. And then even like those who had come out were often kind of like signaled as like being arrogant or selfish for trying to figure out who they were. And yeah, there was like it was a very long article. I do recommend, I did not get to read like every single ounce of it multiple times to really interpret it with, I guess, full media analysis glasses on, but it was a good read, and I like recommend people checking it out. It's a little dated as it's from 2016, but honestly, after doing a quick Google search of like what's happening now, it seemed that like not a ton has changed. There's like been a decent amount of like, especially in regards to like trans rights, lots of just people not saying good stuff, or like really misunderstanding or misrepresenting what that is, kind of how we see in America, where it's like people who think that like sports are in danger because of it. It's not. But there's similar feelings in terms of trans identity in Japan as well. There was another article I read in terms of trying to get like, what is it like to be a woman in Japan in a heavily sexist, patriarchal society. And I read an article called Sexism in Japan. No, why can't we shake sexism? By Mariko Oi, written April 2021, so pretty recently for BBC. And Mariko outlines some of the issues in Japan when it comes to gender equality, which I kind of think we see in terms of the really clear message in the film of Tag that like women are being exploited or used for the male gaze. There's heavy patriarchal tones in play. And that is something that like is pretty real in Japan as of April 2021. So the article actually came out days following former Tokyo Olympics boss Yoshiro Mori, who made global headlines for his sexist comments saying women talk too much, and actually was forced to resign as a student, Momoko Noji, 23 years old, which dope young people making change in the world. They made a petition and collected over 100,000 signatures, which resulted in him resigning. But one thing that was like so like spot on and just wild is that man, 83-year-old man, tried to just replace himself with another like 83-year-old man and been like, I said that, but this guy, this 83-year-old man from the same life and demographic as me, is totally just going to do better. And then everyone was mad. So they were like, absolutely not, sir. Yeah. This is no longer for you. You do not get to pick your replacement when you did the bad thing. And they elected Seiko Hashimoto, a younger woman and former Olympics minister, for being placed there instead. Well, some people viewed this as a victory. Noji, the creator of the petition, said that it was not enough, which I would agree with, because as with any problem within society, it is not just upheld by one thing. There's like this argument, cut off the head. You can't cut off the head when a lot of people under the head are also doing, the limbs are also doing the things independent of the head, or putting the head back on the body. So companies criticized Mr. Mori's comments, but some of them have less than 1% female board members. And, you know, that needs to change. It kind of reflects the fact that it's performative, in that like they disagree with it, so that you'll still buy their products, but they're not actually going to change the infrastructure of their companies. And it kept going that Risa Kimio, an elected member of the Setagawa City Council in Tokyo, agreed with Noji, saying that, which is one of my favorite quotes now of all time, to me, Mr. Mori was only the tip of the iceberg. It was like a whack-a-mole game. People criticized him because he came out to be whacked, but there are many other moles.
Yeah.
So it seems like, you know, when you're relating this back to the film, I like definitely get why, I guess there was a lot of gratuitous violence, but I get kind of like the energy behind it, in that like it seems like it's not being talked about in a lot of circles in men's world, essentially. If we're looking at Japan as men's world, lots of people want to watch the fun game. They don't want to change it. It's benefiting them. So you kind of need to be bold and outside of the norm when you're talking about these things to get attention for these issues. So like in that regard, I was like, okay, I see. Yes. Okay. Did it still feel like a lot to me? Yes. But I kind of like after doing some like context filling in, kind of get it. You know, it seemed somewhat necessary to be bold in your statement. So I,
Yeah.
doing it.
It's something
Stress,
to also
though.
be just yeah, it's something to say to like use that tool and like turn it on the audience too. So like there's some creativity with that of like using it as a way to criticize the audience that usually partakes in that kind of media, which I'm always here for. Like when horror kind of subverts those tropes and narratives to like actually educate you instead of just be like, look at us murder ladies for fun. It's like, look how stupid it is when we just murder ladies for fun, like without any.
Or I guess if you're thinking of like who it's for, if he's trying to change the opinions of other men, would this film do that? I don't know. But it is kind of like on the nose in calling out the disgustingness of it. So like maybe like if we're looking at this, like this film was not made for like other women to realize that men suck. That's
happening.
Like that's happening. And it's instead like for other men to see how gross they are. I don't know. But also obviously like this is very surface level. I did like some research. This is obviously not like the end all be all of what feminism or LGBTQI plus identity is in Japan, but some sources for you. I recommend checking them out yourself if you wish to. And doing additional research because that's the only way we're going to know things and fix them.
Yeah. And I would say, like, it would benefit for us to even watch other films. Because he is known for, like, his graphic and crazy films of, like, mind twists. And so it would be interesting to see what other statements he's making outside of just this one. Yeah. And I was also thinking, like, back to, like, Tarantino in, Kill Bill. It's like, I wouldn't argue that Kill Bill is a feminist film, despite having, like, strong female characters and gratuitous violence. I would never say any Tarantino film is feminist. Yeah. If it is more exploitative, if anything. And so I think that's also kind of funny to use some of these things that would otherwise not be seen as feminist. And I don't know if I would say Evil Dead was feminist either at all. I think Ash versus the Evil Dead makes some steps in the right direction with women characters, but I don't know if the original Evil Deads were that, because women were expendable in them. So using some of those like callbacks is that. Same thing with Matrix. We did talk about the trans identity, but that's also like a retrospective kind of look after, the Mikowski siblings, making that decision later. Yeah. Like who knows how much of it was influenced then. I will say one thing that I was thinking, and I want to say before we kind of close out, is with the wedding scene and how you were saying it could be this like commentary on how you are selling your, women are pretty much being exchanged from one hand of a man to another hand of a man. So like from your father to your husband, you are a piece of property. That the music video and the song by Kimbra, Settle Down, is also commentary on that exact thing of like this whole idea of like conforming to the expectations that you get married and you fulfill this role and that's what's expected of you as women, and like how toxic it is because it's like a young girl who's going through those acts. And I remember reading articles of people being kind of upset because it's a young girl doing the roles and portraying that song, but it's her saying like, we have been conditioned since youth to believe that's the answer, and it isn't. That's what I interpreted Kimbra saying. So Kimbra, if you're out there and you're hearing us, I'll play the music video is fun. Definitely check it out, watch it, because also the song is great. I really love her. Anyway. But yeah, this has been our first episode of the Good Ghouls Gone Bad series. Next week, we will have another guest on live, so be sure to check that out Monday night. We're doing it. 7 p.m. On YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, if we can work all those things out into my software. And then after that, we'll have another deep dive into a film, and we'll continue that on for the next 2 months of Good Ghouls Gone Bad. Please let us know if you have any thoughts about what we talked about today. If you have seen it, make sure you do. If you can stomach it, if you're okay with gore. And definitely shoot us an email at theghouls.nextdoor@gmail.com because we love feedback. Again, if you're like, actually, this movie is trash, or, oh, you're wrong, it's not feminism, or it is more feminist than you even thought, I would love to hear it. Any of those are good. Yeah. Just make sure it's constructive. It's not like, that was trash. And I'd be like, okay, why?
Like, how do we fix trash? I need more. Yeah. But, like, also continue to look at media critically. Look at it. Understand what it's trying to say. You're not always going to get it right. We don't always get it right. Sometimes we think it's saying one thing and it's not. And also, like, who's to say?
Yeah. It's interpretation.
Did the person who's writing the film say it? I don't know. Sometimes they don't even know. Sometimes they make it up afterwards.
Or they don't know what happened. Yeah, or they don't know what, like, the impact would be, you know?
Yeah, it's like...
their intent was different.
It's doing a lot, and, you know, who knows what this guy was trying to say with this film, but we tried.
Yeah.
We did it.
It's like how Babadook became a queer icon. No one saw that coming. You never know. Awesome. So, yes, make sure you like and subscribe. Give us some love and attention on the internet. We have TikToks going now, so you can follow us there as well. And Twitch. We are twitching pretty regularly now. So make sure you're following us on Twitch and play games with us.
You can watch me murder vampire mommy and then be sad. But then also... be so scared of everything else that's after that because no one warned me, and I will never forgive the world for not warning me of how freaking scary this game is. Just saying.
For real.
But come hang out every Thursday, 5 p.m.
Yes, Eastern.
Yes.
So, with that being said, don't get married.
They'll eat your kids.
Oh, it's so nice to say that again. I hope you're happy that we're back.
Yeah, me too,
we're
right?
happy to be back.
Do it.
We love you.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
doing
bye.
stuff. Bye.